Alright, hey guys, what's going on? This is Christopher Z, of course, and Mikey Allstar here, and today we have a little bit of a different script reading. So for this one we're going to be reading something that I wrote that is original. Most of these things that we've been looking at, actually all of them that we've been looking at have been based off of previous properties. Like, of course, we did the Black Widow one, we've done some Batman stuff, Lord of the Rings, all that stuff. But this one was an original thing that I wrote, so I'm going to explain some background information on it, and then we'll dive right in. Alright, so back in 2016, I was in a class called Creative Writing. It was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed that class. And one of our assignments was to make a original script. It had to be about 5 pages. I think that was the limit, 5 or 6 pages. And what I did was, at the time I was reading And Then There Were None in English class, and that kind of inspired me to make my own little murder mystery. And yeah, so I wrote the script, and then I actually had to film it. That was fun. And and then eventually, after that, that was towards the end of the semester, and then we had Christmas break. So during Christmas break, I wanted to expand on the original script that I wrote, and make it into a play, and I did that. So I worked on it over 2016 into 2017, and then I finished it, I believe, in June of 2017. So yeah, it was a lot of fun to make, and yes, this is what it is. It's called An Inkling to the Offings. Now, this is the first act, and this is actually the rough draft. I went back and revised it in June, but this is a rough draft of the first act. We're going to be reading for the first act. And what you in on a little secret, I'm actually working on an audio play version of the finalized script, so I'll let you guys know when that is out. We are currently on Act 4, I believe, out of 7. There are 7 acts. I could really just probably make it melted down into about 3 or 4 acts, but I'm just going to keep it as it is for now. But yes, so I'm excited to announce that, and that wasn't the secret project. I've been mentioning a few secret projects in some of my videos. I have 2 secret projects in the works, and none of those are the ones I just revealed, so yes, but don't worry, I'll tell you guys about the 2 secret projects eventually. So anyways, let us dive in. So we start off Act 1, Scene 1. And like I said before, this is a rough draft. I really refined it a little more in the final draft. So alright, we'll be going through it. I'll tell you guys maybe like some mistakes or how I could improve or whatever. So alright, here we go. So, Scene 1. Inside the main hall of Hildington Manor, all of Hildington's staff are standing in a well-formed line, shoulder to shoulder. Hildington is pacing back and forth, checking each of his staff members to make sure they look ship-shape and prepared for their tasks. Behind them, the magnificent grand staircase that leads to the guest room. Above them, a fancy chandelier. So these are little fragments here, fragmented sentences. I feel like they could be a little better, but I did improve upon them in the final draft. But yeah, it's just a little fragmenty. Anyways, so the first line of dialogue is this. Hildington says, "Splendid. Now, tonight's the big night. We must impress the guests. I need all of you to be on to give it your all tonight. No slip-ups. Got it?" Everyone nods. And one thing I also wanted to note is that I didn't describe what any of the staff look like in this draft. The second draft, I did describe them, but yeah, so you don't really know what they look like. I guess that isn't super important always, because you can like leave it up to the reader's imagination. But also, it's kind of good to like show like what you were thinking at the time too. Show like how you picture them in your mind too, as well, maybe. But you can also like do that like both ways. Like show what you think in your mind, but also like make it a little vague, so like the reader still gets to leave it up to their interpretation. Like Harry Potter. Like if you haven't seen the movies and like you don't know what any of the characters look like, you can still basically tell what they look like from reading the book, but you can leave it up to your interpretation of how they look too. So anyways, alright, everyone nods. Hildington says, "Good. Now, Lacroix, I usually say Lacroix, so there's a more American version of saying that, but of course it's Lacroix if it's French. What's on tonight's menu?" And then he says, "Capavelli with primavera sauce, roasted duck, croissants, and a chocolate cake for desserts." And then Hildington says, "Sounds marvelous. I'll have to remember to save room for desserts. Dayhart, is everything properly trimmed?" Alexa Dayhart is the gardener, and she says, "Yes, sir. I got the flowers that you requested. They're in vases right now. I'll set them on the table once it's made." And alright, and then Hildington says, "The roses?" And then she says, "Yes, sir." And Hildington says, "All of your tools have been properly sharpened, yes?" Alexa says, "I believe so, yes." And then Hildington says, "Excellent. Rosie, are all the rooms prepared?" And then Rosie says, "Yes, I took extra care to make sure they're perfect." Hildington says, "All of the invitations have been sent?" Now, one of the problems here is there isn't really too much description of like what's going on in terms of like the characters, like what they're doing, because Hoddington is just like saying all this stuff, but you really don't know where he's looking or anything. So I feel like that is definitely a problem there. I do fix this problem later in the final draft of the just the final draft. I fixed it up there, but for this draft, I didn't really add anything there. So yeah, it's something to keep in mind too. Like, what are your characters doing? Even though they're just like saying little pieces of dialogue, it's good to know like where they're looking and stuff. And it helps if like someone else is directing this, they wouldn't know what to do exactly. But this gives them a little bit more of a guideline of what to do, and it gives the reader an idea of like what's going on. Like all you see here in your mind is just someone standing there, but you don't really see like what their actions are. So that's a good thing to keep in mind. Anyways, where was I? All the invitations have been set. Juliet, the secretary, says yes, and everyone's responded. They're all coming. And then Hoddington says, perfect. This won't be a dinner party they'll soon to forget. Juliet, I've got some more paperwork for you, so you can work on it before dinner. And Alexa, don't distract her. This line is a little chunky, I must admit. I think I probably fixed it up a little bit, but yeah, it's just doesn't flow quite as well as I would want it to. But that's also something to keep in mind, just how to word and phrase things. There's like a lot of ways to say something, but you want to choose the right one to make it sound like it's right and natural. And Alexa says, of course, sure. Sir, sure, jeez. And then Hoddington says, and you, Elmers, you're familiar with the guests' names, their appearance, heights, and weight, correct? Elmer says, yes, sir, I'm well prepared for the task. Hoddington says, fantastic. The garden tools are in the shed, if you have any unforeseen problems with them. And then Elmer laughs, of course, sir. Hoddington says, very well, the guests should be arriving soon. Remember, treat it like their last meal. As you were. Hoddington walks off and the line breaks up. So yes, there's a lot of foreshadowing in this act. I really tried to like make it almost a little comedical of how heavy-handed the foreshadowing is. So yeah, you will notice the foreshadowing is very heavy-handed, but that is of course on purpose. And yes, so alright. Act 2. A black car with tinted glass drives, carrying Detective Holloway. Holloway is cautiously looking ahead as he holds a phone in one hand. Around him are medium-sized trees, a forest. The road goes right through, but the end doesn't seem to be anywhere. Kind of weird way of phrasing the road goes right through. It should say at least the road goes right through it, or the road goes right through the forest. It's a little vague, but I guess you can understand where it's going with the forest before the road, so you think they would connect. But anyways, so yes, so this scene originally was a lot different when this isn't like the first rough draft, this is like, I think the second rough draft maybe. In this scene, originally, there wasn't any dialogue. Holloway is talking to his wife, Anne, and there really wasn't any dialogue for Anne. It was just Holloway talking to himself, and like you can't hear Anne. But I changed it to add Anne, to give her some more dialogue, since she doesn't have too much dialogue. She appears a few times in the story. But anyways, I digress. So Holloway says, yes, babe, I'll call every night. I'm only there for 5 nights, you know. And then Anne says, doesn't it seem weird, though? 3 famous people, and then there's you. Do you even know why you were invited to this thing? Holloway, of course, is the main character of the story. He says, yeah, weird. No, I'm not sure why I was invited. The invite was very vague. It just said that my skills may be needed. Anne says, your skills? Like, your detective skills? You don't think, and Holloway says, don't worry, I doubt it's anything serious. It's not like anyone's going to get murdered at a silly dinner party, a silly little party. Anne sighs, alright, I just wish I were there with you too. And then Holloway says, I wish you were there too, here too. Hello? Annie? Are you still there? Huh. He quickly looks at his phone and then turns his attention back to the road with a confused look on his face. And Holloway says, no signal, what the heck? The car emerges from the forest and finds a large manor waiting. Holloway says, Jesus, I wish I had that kind of money. Holloway drives across a long bridge and up to the house and parks next to a large stone fountain. Holloway gets out of his black car and takes in the sights. The manor is quite large, with a lot of red curtained windows. The door itself is almost just as impressive as the manor. Engraved with on the expensive wooden doors are the letters B.H. For Bernard Hoddington. That's the name of the guy that owns the manor. The doors were very large and contained gold doorknobs, probably real gold. The manor was a marble color and had stairs going up to the doors. There were also well-kept hedges around the place, and lanterns for when it got dark. Holloway was quite impressed. Holloway walks up to the doors, still looking around. When he reaches the doors, he rings the doorbell. Even the doorbell sounded extravagant. A series of bells went off in a peaceful melody. Inside, Elmers quickly, but gracefully, walks to the door and answers it. Elmer says, "Good evening, Mr. Holloway. Master Hildington has been expecting you." And then Holloway says, "Are any of the others here yet?" And then Elmer says, "I'm afraid not. You were the first to arrive. Please, come in." Holloway walks in, and Elmer checks outside real quick before closing the door. Elmer says, "Looks like you've just arrived just in time, Mr. Holloway." And Holloway says, "Why is that?" Elmer says, "It appears as though there's a storm coming." Yes, some more foreshadowing. Storm. Okay, so this scene, I feel like could use a little work. I feel like I could use more description to make it a little less vague, like just, this takes place in the 90s, so when I say phone, I mean like a flip phone, so I feel like I should have specified that a little more to give the reader a better look and better understanding of when this takes place. And also, some of the dialogue just seems a little iffy, like the dialogue between Anne and Holloway, I feel like it could be like a little more refined, personally. And yeah, I feel like also the description of the manor, I feel like I did a pretty decent job, I guess. But I feel like it's a little disjointed maybe. Like, of course, it's still all describing the same thing, but I feel like it could flow a little better as well, too. So yeah, just pointing out some stuff here. Alright, so we are on scene 3. I don't remember how many scenes are in this. Let me check real quick. Scene. Let's see. Looks like there are 8 scenes in this. So, alright, here we go. Scene 3. Whoops, I accidentally closed. Okay. Eric Waltz is climbing out of a jetliner entitled Asia Airlines. He quickly runs off the plane with a smile on his face. Waltz says, "My, oh my, it's been a while since I've traveled back to America. Just as beautiful as I remembered. Oh, do come here, Armstrong. Take a look at this." Armstrong says, "Yes, sir, coming." Armstrong walks out, looking tired, with 3 suitcases, and looks around. Waltz, simply wonderful. Armstrong says, "Yes, sir." And, Waltz runs down the air stairs. I guess that's what the stairs are called for an airplane, air stairs. I looked it up and that's what it said. I don't know if that's true or not, but that's what I used. And Armstrong slowly walks down. Waltz says, "My goodness, Armstrong, you are sure taking your time, aren't you? You sure are taking your time, aren't you?" And then Armstrong says, "Sorry, sir. No bother at all. Come now, we mustn't be late for the dinner party. Ah, I do believe there's our ride right now. Just in time, too. A black Hertz-looking limo drives up and stops right by Armstrong and Waltz. The door is rolled down. That is also another piece of foreshadowing. Black Hertz, Hertz like a, Hearst, yeah, Hertz, not Hearst, Hearst, like a vehicle that moves a coffin, or a coffin back and forth. Anyways, so the driver says, "Evening, sir," and then Waltz says, "Evening. I suppose you're here to take us to Hildington Manor?" And the driver says, "Yes, sir, it would be an honor to." Waltz says, "Splendid." Driver says, "Well, hop in. I'll get you there in one piece." It's also a little foreshadowing there. Your servant can put the suitcases in the trunk. And Waltz says, "You heard the man, Armstrong." Armstrong says, "Of course, sir." Now, here's one thing that I did change. I changed the relationship a little bit between Waltz and Armstrong. Armstrong is the adopted son of Waltz. And he was like, in this version, he's like more of a servant. But in the next one, in the final version, he's like, he's not my servant, he's my friend or whatever. And then he says, "I'm sorry to insult you, sir." And he's like, "Oh, no need," or whatever. I don't know. Something like that. But he like corrects him, saying that he's not his servant, but he's like a son to him. Yeah. Anyways, so yes, here we go. So Waltz gets into the limo as Armstrong stores. Sorry, I thought it said strolls, but it says stores the cases in the trunk. Then Armstrong quickly hops into the limo and it drives off. Now here's another problem with this scene already. So there really isn't any description of Armstrong or Waltz. You have no idea what they look like. So like you can leave it up to the reader, but you also, I feel like it's a good idea to guide them a little bit, like I said before. So yeah, there's no description. Waltz is an older guy and Armstrong is in his 20s. So yeah, you think there'd be a little more description than that. But there isn't any description saying otherwise, like what he's looks like exactly, just how he is in terms of his dialogue, how you can read him as how he comes off, like his personality. Anyways, so Waltz says, "So what's the manor like exactly?" The driver says, "The manor's a beauty, sir. I'd kill to live there. A nice and pristine lake. It's truly a sight to see. If it was the last thing I'd see, I'd die happy." Yes, a lot of foreshadowing there. I'd kill to live there. If it's the last thing I'd see, I'd die happy. And then Walt says, "Yes, it certainly sounds like it from what you've described. Don't you think, Armstrong?" And then Armstrong says, yes, sir. Simply marvelous. The driver says, we'll be arriving there shortly, sir. Just sit back and relax and let me worry about the driving. The car drives off, and soon the forest surrounds it. Walt says, my goodness, it appears as though a storm's brewing. The driver said, yes, sir. I heard there's a storm in the cards today. A real nasty one, too, at that. And then Walt says, good thing the party's inside, eh, Armstrong? Armstrong says, quite good. I'd hate to get my hair wet, sir. The driver says, here it is coming up now. The jet-black limo drives carefully across the bridge and up to the glamorous house. The sun is right behind the house, makes it appear almost heavenly. Yes, another foreshadowing right there. The sun, though, is soon covered by a dark storm cloud. Covered by dark storm clouds, also foreshadowing. As they drive up, Holloway's car can be seen parked towards the side. And then Walt says, my goodness, Hoodington's Manor is quite a sight. Not quite as grand as the Neuschwanstein or the Taj Mahal, but still quite grand. Quite grand indeed. And then the driver says, just like I said, sir, looks like we're not the first ones here. One of the other guests has arrived. And then Walt says, yes, I do look forward to meeting all of these magnificent people. And then the limo stops right at the staircase leading up to the house, and the driver says, here you are, sir. Walt says, why, thank you very much. You're quite the driver. Do we owe you anything? And then the driver says, much appreciated, sir. No, sir, you don't owe me a cent. Walt pulls out a 50 and hands it to the driver. The driver looks surprised. The driver says, thank you very much. You didn't need to do that, though. And then Walt says, I wanted to. Armstrong, go get the bags out for me, will you? And then Armstrong says, at once, sir. The driver says, hey, do you need a hand? And then Armstrong says, I do believe I have them, but thanks anyways. See this little side part right here? I don't think it's really necessary. I think I may have cut that from the actual script because I don't think it really feels necessary, but I don't know. I don't remember if I did. Anyways, they hop out of the car and Armstrong grabs all of the bags from the back. Enjoy the party. The limo drives off, disappearing into the thick forest. Walt waves after it. Walt says, quite lovely, gentlemen. Come on now, Armstrong, we have a dinner party to attend to. As they walk up to the door opens, and Elmers walks out to greet them. Elmer says, good evening, Mr. Waltz. It is lovely to see that you were so gracious to join us this evening. And then Walt says, yes, wouldn't miss it for the world. I've been all around it too, you know. And then Elmer says, yes, you do have some, I bet you must have some fascinating stories to share. And you must be Mr. Armstrong. A pleasure. Armstrong says, likewise. Elmers moves out of the way as they walk inside. Elmer says, you two are the second guests to arrive. Mr. Holloway is in the sitting room, if you'd like to meet him. Walt says, fantastic. And then Elmer says, I can take those up to Mr. Waltz's room if you'd like, Mr. Armstrong. Armstrong nods, sets the suitcases down. He proceeds to follow Waltz into the sitting room. Elmers grabs the bags and heads up the grand staircase and up to the guest room. All right. So something I did here is you'll notice that Waltz says a lot of the same things a lot of the time. I guess it's like just his way of speaking, you know, like he says, yes, and stuff a lot, and splendid and magnificent, stuff like that. I figured that'd be a way to like add some character to him. You know, people repeat a lot of the same stuff sometimes, like a lot of the same phrases and same words. Like some people say certainly, and like other people say of course or whatever, and stuff like that. So yeah, of course they mix it up a little bit here and there, but people usually say similar phrases a lot. So yeah, that's why I did that, you know, just to give him some character and stuff, give him like some, like how he is. I feel like you can probably get a fairly decent read off of what he's like just from this scene right here. Anyways, so we are halfway done. Not quite halfway done in terms of number of pages, but we're halfway done in terms of number of scenes. So, scene 4. Harding is in her white, medium-sized car driving through the forest. A wind is howling and it's beginning to rain. She suddenly stops when she sees a small cloud of smoke and a blue car stopped. She parks her car and gets out of her car and walks up to the blue car. You see, there's a problem here. There's a lot of repeating stuff. You know, repeating stuff isn't all that bad. It could be reinforcing an idea, but here it's just really chunky. She parks her car and gets out of her car. I could just say she parks and gets out of her car and walks up to the blue car, which is still, it's better, but it's not perfect. But, you know, anyways. Also notice that Harding is, actually, no, sorry, I changed it. Never mind. Okay. So it should say Elizabeth instead of Harding, but I forgot to change that in this draft. But anyways, so she parks her car and gets out. Uwe hears her walk up and gets out of gets out from behind her car. And then Uwe says, "Oh, thank goodness. I was hoping I'd run into someone." Elizabeth said, "What seems to be the problem?" Uwe says, "Rotten luck, it seems. My car just died. I'm not sure what happened, but then again, I'm a painter, not a mechanic." "Oh, well, I'll call up to get towed, unless if you got a tow cable in that car of yours." Elizabeth says, "I'm afraid not." And Uwe says, "Thought so." She pulls out her phone, but there's no signal. Uwe says, "No signal? Weird. Could have sworn I had one just a minute ago." "Oh, well, perhaps one of Hildington's workers could have a look at it." And then Elizabeth says, "I could give you a ride to the manor if you'd like. I was just heading there myself." Elizabeth says, "You're invited too. You've been invited too, have you?" Elizabeth says, "That's right." Uwe says, "Wonderful. What a stroke of luck." Elizabeth says, "Hop in." Uwe grabs the bags from the back of her car and places them in Harding's. It should say Elizabeth there again. Uwe and Elizabeth get into the car and they drive off. As you see here, there's some simple descriptions here. You know, you don't always have to make it sound like all elegant and stuff. It doesn't have to be Shakespeare or anything, but you know, it's also good to like add a little more to your description. You know, just give it a little more character. And give the audience some understanding of what the character is like, too, through descriptions of certain actions. But as you see, I didn't do that here. Anyways, Uwe says, "Thanks for your help. I don't know what I'd do without it." And then Elizabeth says, "Always willing to help a person in need. You said you're a painter, correct?" Uwe says, "Yes, and a darn good one, I'd say. I'm quite famous, you know." Elizabeth says, "I'm an artist myself." And Uwe says, "Dabble in painting now, do you?" Elizabeth says, "Writing." And Uwe says, "Oh, how lovely. I just remembered that I haven't told you my name. I'd lose my head if it weren't attached, you know." Elizabeth says, "I'm sure you would." And then Uwe says, "I'm Uwe Grigorovich." Elizabeth says, "I do believe I've seen some of your work in an art museum before." "Yes, you do have some lovely works." As you see here, the way I've written this scene is like Uwe does a lot of talking, like that's kind of like her personality, a talkative person, and then Elizabeth gives shorter answers and stuff. I tried to do that with this scene. I think I refined it a little more in the later draft, but anyways, so Uwe says, "Thank you, I appreciate it. Most people like them. I've been told that I'm very great at what I do." She's also very full of herself, too. Elizabeth says, "I'm sure. My name's Elizabeth Harding." And then Uwe says, "Are you really? I would have never guessed. I do love your mystery novels. I've been a fan since The Midnight Murder." Elizabeth says, "Thanks. That was one of my better ones. I've been lacking inspiration lately, but I might have found some." Uwe says, "Is that so? Well, good on you." They cross the bridge, but as they cross, the bridge starts to collapse. "Crap, hang on," Elizabeth says. Harding's car just barely makes it before the bridge falls down. Harding stops, and the car stops her car, and they both hop out. Elizabeth says, "That was close." And Uwe says, "It's been one of those days. Let's just hope it's not like this the rest of our stay." Foreshadowing. Originally, the plan was to have a person also, like another guest, driving behind them, and like they die for the bridge collapsing. But I decided to cut that part out. Like, yeah, I didn't think it mattered, honestly, because then I'd just develop a character really fast and then just kill him off right away. So, yeah. Anyways, so they hop back into the car and drive up to the manor. They hop out of the car. Elizabeth parks her car next to hallways. They both get out, grab their bags, and quickly run up the stairs. It begins to rain harder as Uwe rings the doorbell. Inside, Elmers walks to the door and opens it. Harding and Uwe quickly rush into the manor. Elmer says, "Welcome, Mrs. Harding and Mr. Grigorovich. Quite a bit of bad weather we're having, isn't it, madams?" Uwe says, "I'd say so." Elmer says, "Did something happen? I thought I heard a large crash outside." Elizabeth says, "Your darn bridge gave out and nearly killed both of us." Now, I actually changed this to Uwe saying that because Uwe is a lot more hot-headed than Elizabeth, so I figured it would be more appropriate for her to say that than Elizabeth. So Elmer said, "Terribly sorry. It is an old bridge. I'll get someone to fix that." Uwe says, Could you get someone to take a look at my car? It's way back in the forest. It just died." Elmer said, "Of course, I'll send someone to take a look. Sorry for the incident. I'm certain nothing else will happen the rest of your stay. Would you like me to take your bags up to your room?" Elizabeth said, "I appreciate it." Uwe says, "Please." Elmer says, "Of course. You're free to join the rest of the guests in the sitting room." Now, I do brush up the dialogue here. I change Uwe up a little bit more. Like, as it goes on, she gets more hot-headed and stuff. But I change it to early on. She gets just a little more hot-headed. Like, just in this scene, she's, of course, like the one she says, "Your darn bridge gave out and nearly killed the both of us." That one. I give that to Uwe. It's always good to know like what lines go with what character, like what fits their character personality better, because you don't want their personality just changing randomly and changing back. You want to keep it a little more consistent. So yeah, that's why I did that. Anyways, the guests are scene 5. The guests are all in the sitting room getting acquainted. The sitting room is made of the same marble that the rest of the house is made of. There's a chandelier inside, but it's not as grand as the one in the main hall. There are 2 nice brown leather couches and a wooden coffee table. One couch is on the left and the other is on the right. They are both facing inward, with the coffee table in the middle. Each couch can fit 3 people, and on the left sits Waltz and Holloway. On the right, Armstrong and now Uwe. Uwe is keeping a close eye on Holloway. Elizabeth walks into the room and sits in the chair, which is on the other side of the coffee table. It too is the same color and material, probably custom made like the rest. Holloway says, "Hello, I'm Holloway, Nathan Holloway." Uwe says, "How do you do, Mr. Holloway? I'm Uwe Grigorovich, famous painter. Surely you've heard of me." Holloway says, "I can't say that I have. Not really an art person myself." And then Uwe says, "That's a pity." And then Waltz says, "I'm Eric Waltz. Pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Grigorovich." And Uwe says, "Oh, it's Miss." And then Waltz says, "My apologies, Mr. Grigorovich. I thought with such a pretty face that you'd have been taken already." Uwe smiles and blushes at the comment. She turns to Armstrong. Uwe says, "And you are?" Waltz says, "That's Armstrong. He's my personal assistant. Makes the best cup of coffee you'll ever have." And then Uwe says, "Well, how do you do, Mr. Armstrong?" And then Armstrong says, "Fine." You see, Armstrong, he doesn't really have a huge role in this story, but he's very short with everything he says. He doesn't really try to talk that much. So he only talks when he's spoken to, really. Anyways, so Waltz says, Waltz turns to Harding. We finally have a little more action dialogue, or action description. So Waltz says, "And that leaves you. You must be Elizabeth Harding. I thought I heard you'd be joining us." Elizabeth says, "That's right. Pleasure." Waltz says, "It sure is. I've read some of your work. You're pretty good." Elizabeth says, "Thanks. I'd like to think so." And then Uwe says, "What about me? Have you seen my work?" Waltz says, "Can't say that I have, but I'm sure it's good nonetheless." And then Uwe says, "I see. So what do you do exactly?" You see, she's kind of upset that Waltz hasn't seen her work, so she kind of like is a little short with him right here. Like, "I see. So what do you do exactly?" You know, it depends on how the actor interprets that, how they want to say it. But yeah, usually in my mind, it's like it's a little short. She's still trying to be polite, but like she's just a little upset that no one's seen her work, really. Elizabeth says, "He's a world's traveler. Surely you've heard of Eric Waltz." And then Uwe says, "Sounds familiar. Are you in the pictures?" And then Waltz says, Waltz says, "Why, yes, I do create documentaries wherever I go. I'm also an author of books describing my journeys." Elizabeth says, "I've read up on some of your travels. You've been to some amazing places." Waltz says, "Yes, the world is an amazing place. So, what exactly do you do, Mr. Holloway?" And then Holloway says, "Please, call me Nathan. I'm a detective for the police." Holloway says, "Is it risky work?" And then Holloway says, "Sometimes, yeah." And then Uwe says, "I do love risky business." And then, of course, not like Risky Business is the movie, but like risky business isn't just like risky work. Okay, I think you get it. Uwe looks at Holloway and smiles. Holloway uncomfortably shifts in his spots. Waltz says, "No offense, of course, but why exactly have you been invited?" Holloway says, "That's the thing I'm not quite sure about. I mean, all of you are famous, and I'm just, well, a detective." The invite said that the invite I got said that my skills may be needed. Elizabeth says, "Your skills? Does Soddington expect something to happen?" And then Holloway says, I misread that. "I sure hope not. I could use a break." Walt says, "Odd. Quite odd." Uwe says, "Well, I'm glad you're here. Really glad." And then Holloway says, "Yeah." So, one thing to note is there really isn't like too much direction on how the actors should say the lines. I kind of like leaving it up to the actors to decide, and like I could also direct them saying how I want them to say it. But yeah, you think there should be more notes on that, more notes on like how an actor should say something or whatever, like what they're feeling and stuff. So that's something also to keep note of. Anyways, so Elmer's walks into the room. Elmer says, "Terribly sorry to interrupt, but dinner is almost ready." Well, it says, "Splendid. I look forward to trying your cuisine. I don't know about everyone else, but I'm famished." Elmer nods, and he walks out. The guests all get up and file up out of the room. They follow Elmer's into the dining room. Here is scene 6. We have the dining room. Is this scene 6? Yeah, scene 6. Okay. Guests walk into the dining room. The dining room has yet another chandelier and looks very glamorous. The walls are the same white marble, but they have different paintings on them, one of which is a painting of Hoodington himself. Below the chandelier is a large, dark brown wooden table. On the table are 10 plates, one at each end and the rest on the left and right. Chairs also surround the table in a similar fashion. The chairs are the same color as the material as the table. The same color and material as the table. Okay, there we go. And everything is well cleaned and polished. That's a little rough there, but that's okay. On the plates are each of the guest and staff's names except for the back end. Okay, so there are names on each of the plates except for the one at the back. On the left are Mr. Holloway, Miss Grigorovich, Mr. Waltz, and Mr. Armstrong. On the right are Mrs. Harding, Miss Dayhart, Miss Scriber, and Mr. Elmers. On the front end is Miss Shen. On the back is reserved for Hoodington himself. At each of the plates is also a small vase with a rose in it. So there you go. Elmer says, "You may take your seats. The staff will be arriving shortly." Uwe says, "Is it typical for the staff to be eating with the guests?" And Elmer says, "Oh yes, Master Hoodington wants them all together." And then everyone takes a seat. And Walt says, "My, oh my, smell that, Holloway? That's the smell of beauty." Holloway says, "It sure is." Elmer says, "Yes, we certainly are in for a great meal tonight." And Walt says, "Great, I'm starving. What about you, Armstrong?" Armstrong says, "Yes, sir." Walt says, "Good man." Elmer says, "Here comes the staff now." The door opens and in walks okay, that's a problem there. In walks in Rosie. Right after her, Alexa and Juliet walk in. They are holding hands and chatting, but they are soon interrupted by Uwe's stare. Alexa blushes, and they both quietly take their seats. Elmer says, "Everyone, this is Rosie Shen. She's the maid here, and a lovely maid at that. She is at that." And then Rosie blushes a little at the comment. She says, "Thanks, Harold. I try to do my best." Uwe says, "And who are you?" She points to Juliet and Alexa. Juliet and Alexa glance at each other and then back at Uwe. Juliet says, "Juliet Scriber, ma'am. I'm Mr. Hoodington's secretary." And Alexa says, "And I'm Alexa Dayhart. I'm the gardener." Holloway says, I suppose you're the one who's responsible for the flowers?" And Alexa says, "Yes, hand-grown." Holloway says, "They're lovely." Alexa says, "Thanks. Mr. Hoodington picked them out." Elizabeth said, "Speaking of which, where is he?" Elmer says, "He should be arriving shortly." Holloway says, "Now that I think about it, he never gave me your name." And Elmer says, You're quite right, Mr. Holloway. I'm Harold Elmers, the butler." Walt says, "I'm guessing you know all of our names." And then Juliet says, "Yes, Mr. Hoodington told us." And Alexa says, "Plus, they're right there at on your plates." Everyone laughs except Uwe. You see, Uwe kind of has it out already for Alexa and Juliet. And okay, that grows as the story goes on. Okay, so Walt says, "Yes, you're quite right." Just to add, it's kind of a superfluous line, but I figured that's how Walt is, so I added it anyways. Suddenly, the lights go out and Uwe screams. When the lights go back on, Hoodington is standing at the front of the end of the table. Hoodington is terribly sorry for that. The wires aren't what they used to be. Elmer said, "Quite an entrance, sir." Hoodington says, "Yes, it was dramatic, wasn't it? I'm glad you all found the place all right." Uwe says, "Glad to be alive, more like it. Your darn bridge gave out." And then Hoodington says, "Is that right? My apologies, Mr. Gorovich. We've been needing to fix that for a while. Isn't that right, Juliet?" Juliet says, "I sent for someone, but no one's arrived yet." Hoodington says, "Simply dreadful. Hopefully that'll be the worst of the events to happen these next few days." And then Holloway says, "Speaking of that, Mr. Hoodington, why am I here exactly? Why exactly am I here? I do like your manners so far, but I was told that my skills may be needed." Hoodington says, "Yes, I'll get to that later. Right now, let's eat. You must be starving." Waltz laughs. "Ha, sure am." And then Hoodington makes way to his chair and takes a seat. And then Hoodington says, "Chef Lacroix, we're ready to dine." And then Lacroix, I'll just say Lacroix for this one, walks out from the kitchen carrying plates with croissants. And he says, "Your first course. Calavetti. I don't know. I wrote this. I can't even pronounce the cheese. With primavera sauce and croissants. And then Jack Lacroix sets his plates at the center and backs away. And he says, "Bon appetit." And then he returns to the kitchen. All right, and then we've got scene 7 here. One of the next scene is pretty short after this. Scene 8. That's the last scene. So, all right, here we go. Everyone is sitting around the table, enjoying Lacroix's well-cooked food. Uva keeps on glancing at Holloway, and Hoodington is smiling as he looks around at all of the guests. Rosie and Elmers appear to be mouthing a conversation, but no one else hears. Elizabeth appears to be in a deep thought, possibly thinking about her novel, while Waltz is grinning as he's eating on what's on his plate. See, alright, so there's a little more description here. So there you go. You see what each character is doing, and I guess get an understanding of what they're thinking right now a little bit. So, alright, so Waltz says, "Your chef is top-notch, Hoodington. I haven't eaten this good since my trip to India." Hoodington says, "Yes, he's quite the culinary artist." Uva says, "Mr. Holloway, would you mind passing me a croissant?" And then Holloway says, "You can call me Nathan." And sure. Holloway grabs a croissant and gives it to Uva. Uva catches hold of his hand for a moment. Uva says, "You're quite strong, Nathan." She smiles at Holloway, but Holloway tries to avoid her gaze. Instead, he looks at Uva's hand. Juliet, Alexa, and Waltz watch to see what will happen next. Holloway says, "Thanks, that worked out." Then Uva says, "I'm sure you do. You're quite handsome, too. But I bet you get that a lot." Holloway says, "Yes, my wife does say that from time to time." And then Uva says, "Your wife?" And then Holloway says, "That's right." And then Uva says, "Oh." She looks down at her plate and blushes. "I didn't realize that you were married." And then Waltz just laughs heartily. He says, "Quite embarrassing, isn't it, Armstrong?" Armstrong looks at Uva for a second and does a half smile, as if trying to say sorry for Waltz's behavior. Everyone tries avoiding looking at Uva as she continues to blush from embarrassment. There's a brief period of silence in which no one talks, but it's broken by Alexa. Alexa says, "So you're a detective, right, Nathan?" Holloway says, "That's right." And then Alexa says, "Have you come across any unusual cases?" I just sat on. What the heck is this? Okay. So, random Lego blocks. This is what you get for filming Lego videos. You always find random Lego blocks all over the place. Anyways, so she says, "Have you come across any unusual cases? Like, really unusual?" And then Hoodington says, "Alexa, please. I don't think Mr. Holloway wants to talk about it." And then Holloway goes into a little monologue here, telling a story. So, he says this. This is actually a story based on something that I read online. I don't even remember what the story was exactly, but it's something like this. I'm not sure if it's real or not, but I don't know. Anyways, so Holloway says, "I don't mind. Oh, believe me, I've had my share of unusual cases. One comes to mind at the moment. Back about 3 years ago, we uncovered quite an odd case. I was in New York. Someone reported that they hadn't seen their neighbor in about a week. They said the last time they saw him, he threw a small party. We went up to the room, and all of the guests were lying there, dead. The only one alive was the dog. As you can imagine, it had to eat, and well, you get the rest. It wasn't a pretty sight. We were never to figure out what killed them all. It's still unsolved to this day." Yes, pretty dramatic. And then Alexa says, "Wow, odd indeed." All right. So Uva says, "Sounds like a great story for a book. Are you taking notes, Elizabeth?" And then Elizabeth says, "Yes, it would make for a great novel." Juliet says, "I've read some of your books, and I do like them. I'm looking forward to the next one." Elizabeth said, "Thank you." So I'm using kind of ways to jump into another conversation, transitioning to a new topic. So I figured it worked out pretty alright, I guess. It doesn't seem super forced, but I guess it is a little forced maybe. Let's see. Elmer says, "Yes, you're a very good writer. Juliet's let me borrow her copies of some of your books." And Juliet says, "Speaking of which, do you mind maybe telling us about your next novel?" Elizabeth says, "Sure, I don't see no harm in it. Maybe I'll have a couple more fans." She smiles as she looks around the room. Everyone listens intently. So far, it's about a dinner party going south as each guest is killed off. It started back in September, though. It's got a long way to go. And then Hoodington says, "Very interesting. Sounds like a page-turner." Waltz laughs. "Let's hope the same doesn't happen here." Everyone laughs. Okay, so Act 8. Here we go. Final act. Wait, Act 8. Hold on a second. Scene 8. The final scene of Act 1. So, here we go. Juliet walks into the kitchen. Crow is seen standing by a granite counter. On the counter is a scrumptious-looking chocolate cake. Crow turns around to face Juliet. Juliet says, "Is the cake ready, Jacques?" I spelled Jacques wrong. I spelled without an S. It's Jacques. I don't know. Anyways, Lacroix says, "Yes, I'll bring it out right away." Lacroix looks around the kitchen for a second. Wait. I'm missing a knife. Juliet says, "A knife? Where'd you have it last?" Lacroix says, "It was right here in the holder. Weird." Juliet says, "I'm sure it will turn up. It's got to be around somewhere." Lacroix says, "I suppose so." And then Juliet exits the kitchen, and Jacques grabs the cake. He carries it out into the dining room, and the knife holder can be seen where the knife is missing. Sorry, I'm just clearing my throat. I wasn't saying that there's any foreshadowing there or anything. No. So there you go. That is the first act. Sadly, I won't be reading the rest of the acts, but I will let you guys know when the official audio thing is out. It will be more descriptive since it's the final draft instead of this draft, which is not as descriptive. But yes. So basically what happens in the rest of this is that there are murders that go on in a hallway, and the rest of the guests have to figure out who's doing it before they kill everyone. And yes, they're all stuck in the house because the bridge is broken. So anyways, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you guys maybe learned some stuff, perhaps, about writing, maybe I helped just a little bit, possibly. But anyways, guys, I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye!